Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sunday, the 13th of July's live at the Waterhole extravaganza for the next 2 hours with me, Ben Coley. I will be guiding you through our cameras all across southern and eastern Africa for the next couple of hours. And we've started out at Camelthorne Farmstead up at Botswana, which has been the scene of some very interesting sightings over the last few days, or certainly the last few times that I have been doing live at the waterhole. Loads and loads of hippo activity, which has been great to see. And we've started off with an elephant having a mud bath and a beautiful, often underappreciated herd of impalas watching on. But as always, for those of you who join us regularly, you will of course know this. If you are just joining us, if you've just found us, this show is live and interactive for the next couple of hours. So please do send in questions and comments as per what you see on the screen. You can scan the QR code or use the link there. That will be fed through to me, and hopefully, I will answer any of your questions or general musings on nature, wildlife, and what we are watching. And of course, you can join the conversation on X as well. I know we'll all be appreciating the elephant having his mud bath, but I think it's a good opportunity just to mention the impala. Of course, they are the most common antelope species that we have out here. And because of that, they often don't get the recognition that they deserve. I always maintain that along with the gemsbok or the oryx, they are one of the prettiest antelope species that we have out here. That short silken fur always looks in such wonderful condition, thanks to their ability to groom themselves and their propensity to groom each other, what we call allo grooming. Always means that they look in good condition. And some rogue wildebeest as well. And there is our boulder field of hippos, which has become quite commonplace up here at Camelthorne. Not often you see so many out of the water so regularly. But yes, spare a moment for the impalas. We do have a tendency to drive past them because we see them so regularly. But a truly spectacular animal, and as I always say, there's a reason there's so many of them because they are exceptionally good at what they do. However, on the cuteness scale, I'm not sure they match this little hippopotamus calf diligently following mum. Very, very sweet to see. And lovely to see them out in the water. You normally just get to see some ears, eyes, and a nose. Would you go and investigate your surroundings, little one? Hello, Penelope Kenyon from a beautiful sunny KwaZulu-Natal north coast. I'm sorry it rained yesterday, but you say it's been a beach day today. Excellent. Make the most of it during this time of year, I say. The hippos have had the same idea. They just need a towel underneath them, and they would look quite at home, lying on the sand. And flop. Hello, Deb D. Nice to hear from you as well. Thank you for joining us. But it is a bit strange. I mean, hippos do come out of the water and they do lie on land, but I've never seen such a large amount all coming out. And you can see they're all gravitating towards the same place. Interesting, they all seem to be lying in the same orientation, certainly the ones that we can see. I assume probably to maximize the benefit of the sun. And it has made me wonder why it's so, I wouldn't say so different. I'm sure it happens elsewhere, but we don't see it particularly commonly to have so many come out. I wonder if it's this very sort of deep bowl in which this water is with the cold air sinking that perhaps it is a little bit cooler down there than the hippos would like, so they're taking the opportunity to come and lie on this nice soft sand and capture some of the sun's rays to warm up a little bit after a cool evening. What are you doing, little one? You're having a little nibble on Mum's side there. Maybe a little chin and muzzle scratch on Mum's super thick skin, called hippo hide, and hippo leather is very, very sturdy, one of the strongest that you will find, and has been used to create. Oh, has been used to create whips and shamboks and things. Very, very, very tough leather. Miguel, you're asking if there's a reason why hippos have that pink or red sweat. Yes, absolutely, there is. For a long time, people thought that they were bleeding. It was called blood sweat, but it is actually a secretion from specific glands, which, to my knowledge, are only found in hippos, and they produce two different substances, one called hippocyridic and one called norhippocyridic acid. It's not an acid, but it's just the name given to him. And it seeps through the skin and soaks into the skin, covering it. And when it does so, when it is brought into contact with the atmosphere, with the oxygen and other chemicals in the atmosphere, it turns a pink color. I don't know what the specific ingredient is that allows it to actually happen, but it's a reaction with the atmosphere, and that substance has multiple uses. It predominantly acts like a sunblock to stop them getting cooked by those UV rays, their skin being very, very sensitive to sunlight, and also acts as a sort of a natural antibiotic for all of the cuts and scratches and scrapes that they typically have. Just take a look at any of those hippos and you'll see that there are plenty of scars, and I don't think I've ever seen a festering wound on a hippo. Nature's antibiotic does an exceptional job, which is just as well considering their um, preference for squabbling and those razor sharp teeth. It is one of those strange things that hippos, being solely, oh, a bit of a fright, solely vegetarians, have such fearsome armaments, um, enormous teeth, razor sharp, well, not razor sharp in terms of piercing, but the way that they, when they open and close their mouth, the tips of those teeth sort of self-sharpen each other and they create a very, very sharp edge, and they can easily lacerate that thick skin. Interested to see whether we have any interaction between the hippos and the elephant. I doubt it. Everyone seems to be minding their own business. So I was not very happy with something.
My name is Amy, and today we're going to be doing things a little bit differently. Would you like to know the difference between a male and a female wildebeest? You can ask me questions like this in real time. Our safaris are live and interactive here in the heart of Africa. Join me on Safari Live and connect with nature.
These ones very close because we're very close to the Pateti River Valley, and that often offers these zebras a good opportunity to get water during the dry season. They're normally sort of between June to November. They all converge in this area to benefit from the river itself. During the wetter seasons, they will move on easterly Makarakari salt pans in order to benefit from the fresh grazing after any potential flooding in that area before returning back west into this area again during the next dry season. But I must admit, I was not particularly aware of seasonal zebra movements in Botswana, not something that we have here in South Africa. There used to be migrations of animals, certainly going back a few hundred years to and from the Drakensberg Mountains to take advantage, seek refuge from the conditions at certain times of the year. But those migrational tendencies have long since stopped now, mostly due to the human interference with the erection of fences and so on and so forth. But that is a whole lot of zebras. Must be well over 1,000 or so here, probably a few thousand in shot. Leon, you're asking how do stallions keep track of their harem in a scene like this? A very good question, Leon. It'll all done through smell, visual recognition, communication through sound as well. Probably why a lot of this whooping is happening, but most of the time it'll be done by smell. And these are situations where you do often see a few little fracases between stallions. Great opportunity for young stallions to potentially poach mares for their own group or to start their own group. And that normally leads to little scraps ensuing. Often, when you do see a zebra minus a tail, it's usually a stallion, not from a predator interaction, but more likely two stallions fighting over something. Um, Almost always females. Remember, zebras are not territorial themselves over a particular area, but they are territorial over their group of females. Well, a dazzling scene, certainly at Noella Lodge. It sounds like we've got a visitor down at Mantis Founders Lodge in the Eastern Cape there, so let's quickly pop down there and have a look. Ah, a beautiful rhino with an oxpecker. Always very, very special to see. Two rhinos, no less. Definitely one of the highlights of this camera to be able to show you some white rhinoceroses. Of course, they are dehorned in this area. You can see those horns are not as long as they should be, but they have got a decent amount of length, and this one has got some serious girth to his horn. Now, I'm assuming this is a male. I haven't been able to check between the back legs to make sure from the angle that he is at, but normally you can tell the sex of a rhino just by looking at the horn. Males generally will have shorter horns than females, but will be larger and more substantial in order to stop them from breaking during conflict. Whereas females, they're obviously for protection, but more from an intimidation perspective. Tears, you're asking, do white rhinos use body language to communicate? Yep, all animals do so. Obviously, I can only tell you what I know, but I'm sure there's more going on than we necessarily realize. But they'll often do lateral displays where they stand side on to each other to show off their size and their bulk. The ears will generally have something to do with it as well. Ears being sort of laid back across the head is generally seen as a submissive posture. The tail also will denote certainly a stressed rhino that we would see. So, an uncomfortable rhino will curl its tail up almost like a pig, sort of hooking up over its back. You'll normally see if a rhino runs away from you or from something it doesn't like, that tail will be curled up. Same way an elephant's tail will also sort of stick out away from the body if it's stressed and upset about something. I'm sure there are other forms of body language that they will use as well, but those are the main ones that spring to mind. BBC, you're asking, is the multiple for rhino rhinoceroses or rhinoceri? I would just normally go with rhinos, to be honest, BBC. But I believe officially it is rhinoceroses, although I do rather like rhinoceri. But as far as I know, it's rhinoceroses or rhinoceroses, which basically translates to nose horn. Miguel, you're asking what signals do rhinos use during courtship and mating? There's quite a, I consider it quite a specific noise that if I hear it, then it's certainly a communication, usually of a male pursuing a female. It's kind of like a fairly sort of repetitive couple of notes of a huffing sound. Most of the sound communication that they make is almost like exhalations of air. Um, of course, babies squeal. Females, I've heard them sort of roar quite regularly if a male's advances are not welcomed. They give a very intimidating sound that they give off. It does sound like a sort of a noise, if that's as close that I can do off the top of my head. But that noise a male often makes if he is pursuing a female and proclaiming his interest in her. Once he will then pursue her, and then he will often, as with all animals, you will see him checking her reproductive status with his organ of Jacobson in his mouth, that vomeronasal organ, by smelling the urine, smelling the dung, picking up those specific hormones that he would then be able to interpret. Often you'll find them sort of resting their chin a little bit on the rump of the female, again, a little bit of sort of TLC. And should she then be receptive, obviously the mating process should occur, which I have been fortunate enough to witness on a couple of occasions. It's quite entertaining to watch. It's quite a long-lasting affair if you compare it to things like lions, where it's all over in a few seconds. In rhinos, generally speaking, from my observations, it's about a half an hour or so of interaction. So yeah, very interesting to watch, certainly, and let's hope that they continue to do it, because the more of them we have, the better in that regard. But certainly that's more sort of heavy breathing, very much is what I associate with them. Okay, well, this rhino is not showing us its full glory at the moment, so let's head over to Tembi.
I met this remarkable rhino bull, whose name is Samson, last year in a place of extraordinary beauty, history and story. I'm going back there to see him in October, and I think you should come with me to his mysterious mountain fastness.
Even a hyena coming into the action as well now. Oh my word! She's stalking the hyena now. Leopard, hyena, lion, all together in one shot. Oh! Woo! This is action-packed.
thing on this one's left flank there. Looks like maybe sort of an abscess or something. Uh, Jasper, you're asking what are the unsuccessful Rams doing now? Well, pretty much exactly this. It's been and gone, their opportunity. They will have had to have swallowed their pride now, and they will be biding their time, waiting for the breeding season for next year. So generally, that rutting season, the time at which the impalas will make their territories and hold their territories, is sort of April, May time. So now well into July. So all the females that are going to get pregnant have likely become pregnant now. There may be one or two outside of the standard season, but it is very, very specific. With impalas, it's one of the ways they've evolved, say, to combat the risk of predation. Everybody gets pregnant at the same time of year, everybody gives birth at the same time of year, and leads to safety in numbers. Intrigued by what this thing is on this foreground ram's left hind quarters there. Difficult to see specifically, but does look like it's some sort of skin reaction. Whether it's from an injury or whether some sort of infection in there, I'm not 100% sure, but often you'll find that oxpeckers pecking at it if it is an open wound. And this one seems to be quite happy just hitching a ride on its back. Lots of grooming going on. Right, let's head up to Kenya and check in at Oldonyo. Beautiful bull on the left with a lovely set of tusks, a younger one on the right, and a couple of sneaky zebras in the background. A relatively quiet scene at Old Donyo. Of course, it can be chaotic here. We've had live at the waterhole sessions here where we've had 15 or so bulls clustered around that water, and then herds of zebra and eland and giraffe and oryx all waiting in the background for their turn. But things fairly quiet and sedate at the moment at Old Donyo at least. But that may all change. Really see the extent of the surface area of those ears and why they are so important for thermoregulation. If you combine both sides of each ear, you get more than about a third of the entire surface area of the elephant. And if you can keep that cool by flapping them, generating airflow over that thin skin and the blood vessels close to the surface, is a great way of cooling all the blood and circulating it around the rest of the body. 20 minutes or so for that blood to forge a path from the heart right the way around the body and back again. An enormous network of veins and arteries for that blood to flow through. Jungle, yes, elephants will dig holes for water in the winter, and they're very, very specific and clever about where they will do so. Normally in drainage lines, so those dry riverbeds, even though they may be dry to you and I on the surface, a very good chance there are some underground aquifers, and elephants are well known to be able to smell water over large distances. They can certainly follow the rains by listening to the thunder, potentially even picking up changes in air pressure and those seismic vibrations from the rumblings of storm clouds. But that incredibly sensitive nose is able to pick up underground water flow, and they will figure out the best place to find it, and they will dig down using their tusks, digging with their heels until they allow that water to naturally filter through the sand. And they will often prefer that water to a stagnant, well, they will always prefer that water to a stagnant puddle because of that natural filtration process. Often, certainly down here, we tend to find that in those dry riverbeds, if there's what we call a dolerite dike, a vertical intrusion of a particular type of rock called dolerite that acts like a dam, and underground water flow will build up next to it, and that is often where you'll see evidence of them digging down to find fresher water. Okay, I didn't quite catch where we're going to next, but we're going to try another one of our cameras. Let's go have a look. Back to Mantis Founders Lodge and our rhino. This one you can see evidence of the dehorning process, very flat top. Looks like likely a younger male. I don't think this is the one we saw before, but there were two. A nosy rhino. See those ears twitching like great radar dishes. They miss nothing. Incredibly sensitive sense of smell and sense of hearing. Just look at the shape of those ears, a conical shape, perfect for picking up sound and channeling it down into the ear canal. Very hard to equate to you how good their hearing is, but not much escapes a rhino. As you can see, very dopey eyes, eyes hanging very low over the pupil, or eyelids hanging very low. Might as well have a lie down, buddy. As you can see, every time his attention is attracted to something, it usually happens just after the ears have twitched and homed in on a sound from somewhere. So tiny little eyes in comparison to that head, so very much reliant upon smell and hearing over sight. But often their sight is generally considered very poor, but in my experience, it's a bit better than it's often made out to be. I am very confident that I have been spotted by a rhino from a good 100 meters away, even while standing relatively still. I'm sure that they wouldn't be able to read the brand name of my clothing, but certainly with movement, they are pretty adept at picking it up with, I think, a longer range than perhaps they're sometimes given credit for. It seems that we've headed over to Rosie's pan. Oh, Hippo having his peace and solace destroyed by three elephant bulls coming in for a drink. Good question there from Joy. Still going, sticking with the rhinos, asking why don't we see that white secretion in the corner of rhino eyes like we do with elephants? That is all to do with something called the Harderian gland, which is like a specialized tear gland, which you find in many other animals, but particularly well known with elephants. They produce this sort of fatty, lipid-rich secretion, which helps to lubricate the eye, protect it against dust and UV rays from the sun, and possibly even releasing pheromones that I don't believe in the case of the elephants, but rhinos don't have that Harderian gland, so that's why they don't produce that sort of gunky white secretion that builds up. They do have a sort of a tear gland, for want of a better word, and also that nictitating membrane, that third eyelid that sweeps across horizontally. It does lubricate the eye, but it doesn't produce that same sort of oily, milky secretion that we see in elephants. If you do see something like that with a rhino, it's likely got an infection, just like if we had an eye infection, we get a build-up of gunky stuff around the eye. But it's the lack of that Harderian gland. These three all look very similar aged, all boys, a little bachelor group. They're not uncommon to see youngsters like this associating with a much bigger, older elephant. If there is one here, maybe he has already drunk and has moved off somewhere, but that's quite normal to find the boys sticking together. Whether or not these have all come from the same breeding herd, very, very difficult to say. It's certainly a possibility, but young elephants do form these little bachelor groups, and often there will be relationships forged here which will last their entire lives, even if they go off on their own on little forays for perhaps months at a time. They will recognize each other when they return, greet and swap war stories.
My name is Amy, and today we're going to be doing things a little bit differently.
At Wild Earth, we believe every story has the power to create change. That's why we've launched the Wild Earth Impact Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to conservation and social impact. By showcasing conservation stories, we can change lives, protect nature, and empower communities. We have partnered with Empowers Africa to accept tax-deductible donations from US donors. Your donation will help fund critical programs that support our mission. Join us and be part of the change.
Welcome to Safari Spotlight. We'll be
And you pretend like you're a salesman, eh?
Got no idea what's going on this reserve.
Expecting the unexpected.
Are we stuck down there?
What am I trying to do?
Because we have another giant of Mabula.
That was incredible.
This is unbelievable.
It's going to be a spectacular afternoon.
How cool is this?
Ivan, you're saying there have been several bird names that have changed recently, and who or what prompts these changes? I would have to find the specific organization that is responsible for it. It'll be the Ornithological Society of something, I would imagine. Generally speaking, the reason that the names change, well, it depends if we're talking scientific name or um, common name. It's normally the common names that get changed. Of course, there is this regular debate that I'm sure people do it just to make you buy new bird books and new bird apps with updated names. That may or may not be the case. That's a discussion for another day. But generally, it's done just to try and align everything with different countries, because the problem certainly that used to be very prevalent is that you might have the same bird species that occurs in 10 different countries, and in those 10 different countries they all have different common names, and that makes it very, very difficult for people conducting research to phone their friend in Botswana and say, oh, have you seen, for example, a black-eyed bulbul, or which is what it used to be called before it is now a dark-capped bulbul. And if you didn't know what you were talking about, it could lead to confusion and issues in the research. So the main reason is to try and get conformity and a uniform name used throughout the world, be it common name or not. Scientific names change, often due to the discovery of new genetics, which may mean that a bird that wasn't considered a separate species now is a separate species, or vice versa. I don't remember the specifics, but just as an example, um, I see very recently there were two new species of crocodile discovered in the Caribbean, which were considered to all be a part of the same species, but due to genetic testings, we've now discovered that they are distinct enough to be their own species. So, two new species of crocodile were added recently. I've no idea what their common names are, but just an example of how our understanding of genetics and our ability to test and record those genetics are leading to diversification or streamlining of the taxonomical record. Honestly, I find it very difficult to keep up with these name changes. Things that were what they were when I learnt them are probably still going to be the same, in my mind at least. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. I try and keep up, but every now and again somebody comes up with a new bird that I've never heard of, but turns out it was one that I knew, but just by a different name. Had this discussion with a friend of mine. We were up at a place called La Chalametzi, doing some birding, and we were trying to identify a pipit, which is often the case. They're very, very hard to identify. And I had an app, and the person I was with had the more updated version, and they had a pipit on there that I'd never heard of before. I honestly can't remember the name, but discovered it's what I used to know as a long-billed pipit, and has now had its name changed. But that's why it's a good idea to get the up-to-date versions. Right, I think we're going to head over to. Oh, I wasn't really listening. Serendella, maybe, but let's see. It was Serendella, excellent. And a warthog having a scratch in the mud, enough to bring a smile to anybody's face on a Sunday afternoon. And a lone vervet monkey as well, coming down to enjoy the view. Where's the rest of your family, Mr. Monkey? Are they in that tree? Or have you just come down for a trip? Monkeys, incredibly social animals. There was an interesting article I read recently of chimps in captivity, not being recorded in the wild, but chimps in captivity that seem to have come up with a new idea of sticking blades of grass in their ears and keeping them in there and walking around with them. And in this case that I read about, the sort of dominant, I think it was the female in this particular group of chimps, or a high ranked female started doing it, and then a lot of the other ones started to copy, and all these chimps sitting around with bits of grass hanging out of their ears. And then in a completely unrelated study, they seem to be doing it by putting grass in, let's just say, another orifice and walking around with it hanging out from there for no particular good reason, it seems, other than it's almost like a craze or a fad, and one does it, and then the others start doing it as well. We don't fully know why, but we assume it's to do with sort of building social bonds within the groups, and that if a high ranking individual is doing it, if I, as a lower ranking individual, also stick grass where the sun doesn't shine and walk around with it hanging out there, I'm trying to be like you and supporting you, and you can be my friend, and we can be friends because we share the same accessorizing ideas. But they did say it hasn't been seen done in the wild, only in captive groups, which I think was a very poignant representation that animals in captivity that are usually used to going out and foraging for their food and generally surviving and living their lives, very different situation. Sorry, I'm never not amused by warthogs having a scratch. That they do need to be kept entertained. They've got big brains. They need to be kept active, and this is a good example of why enrichment for animals in captive situations is so important for their mental well-being. Robert 4217, you're saying everything's looking very, very dry, and when will the next rain arrive? Well, we don't know, Robert. If we knew, we would be all rich and powerful because we can fully predict the weather, but we do occasionally get a random little smattering of rain during the winter, but here in southern Africa, winter is our dry season as a rule due to the Hadley cell and the area of high pressure over the central part of southern Africa, particularly in South Africa, that stops the warm, moist air from the ocean coming inland, rising up the escarpment and condensing to form a cloud cover. But we would be hoping and expecting the rains to start maybe sort of October, November time, and then finishing again around about sort of April. Canine Girl, you're asking why hippos don't use mud as much to protect their skin like we see elephants and rhinos, and in this case, warthogs to do. It's a good question, Canine Girl. I can't give you a definitive answer for it. I think probably the fact that their lifestyle means that they stay within the water negates the need for regular mud bathing. Plus, as we've mentioned a couple of times, they have that inbuilt sunscreen and sunblock from the glands from within their skin. Um, so yeah, I think it's just a lot to do with sort of specific habitats, really. Probably quite difficult for a hippo to roll around and sort of almost flip over onto its back. Little legs, really big bulk of a body would make it a little bit more difficult. But when the water does dry up, you'll see them all lying in this very sort of sludgy mud. It's the best that they can do. But if that disappears, then they can survive for long periods out of the water. They will just find themselves a very shady spot and try and keep out of the sun.
Join me, Andrew Wistenholm, for an indescribable 6-night stay in the beautiful Albany of the Eastern Cape at Amakhala Game Reserve. Now, this trip is going to be action-packed with a lot of storytelling, adventure, as well as the opportunity to make everlasting memories. We'll be exploring the best of Amakhala by staying at 2 luxury lodges, which will be the perfect blend of comfort as well as wilderness. Book your spot today and let's get ready to explore the wild beauty of Amakhala.
What does it take to handle the wild? Balance. Determination. Focus.
Yaku!
And gear that can take a beating so you don't have to.
My full name is Cedric Leslie Dold. I grew up mostly here in the Lowveld. I grew up here pretty much on the southern side of Kruger National Park, a place called Marloth Park, for most of my years. Something surprising about myself, I did play drums in a band for many years. Best sighting I've presented, we found Palumba in the 2 cubs, and the cubs are just way big.
Are you ready for the adventure of a lifetime? Wild Earth Travel's newsletter is your passport to a magical journey. Explore exclusive travel options featuring special offers at stunning Wild Earth locations and all hosted by your favorite presenters. Don't miss out. Head over to our website and subscribe to the Wild Earth Travel newsletter today and stay in the know on all our unforgettable adventures. Wild Earth Travel, where Africa comes alive.
It has a very distinct gamey taste, but kudu, eland, impala, springbok, all of which you can get out here, they're very similar, or more sort of steaky, as opposed to that sort of very strong game smell or taste that you can get in wild meat. Interesting little engagement from these two, came tearing down the hill and have disappeared again. Not sure what that was all about. A little race up and down, doing some hill climbs. Catfather, you're asking, does wallowing in mud help warthogs reduce their sort of scent footprint, as it were, and make them less obvious to predators? Catfather, it might do, but I do not believe that that is their primary reason for doing so. It is protection against the sun and for them scratching to rid the skin of external parasites, little ectoparasites, ticks and mites and things. We had this discussion a while back. It's not like Arnold Schwarzenegger in the original Predator movie who smears himself in mud and cannot be seen by the predator. As far as I know, it might have some effect, but I really don't think so. Certainly not statistically. But there are ways that you can reduce your smell in that regard. We see it quite often with young animals and the way that their mothers look after them. So a steenbok is a very good example. Youngsters, their urine is normally drunk by the mother if she is there as it comes out to remove any smells. The dung, of course, is buried in terms of steenbok, but I personally don't subscribe to the fact that that is done to remove the smell from an area. If anything, I think it actually does the contrary. Because they are territorial animals, steenboks, they demarcate their area with dung, which contains their specific hormonal information, and steenbok do inhabit fairly dry, arid areas that would cause your dung to dry out very, very quickly, and your urine for that matter, and therefore negate that important information. It makes more sense in my brain, at least, that it is covered up to keep it moister for longer and for that scent to permeate through. I don't believe that just putting a little bit of sand on it would stop a predator being able to potentially detect your presence. Oh, hello. Everybody enjoying a little bit of sunbathing today. It's a Sunday, it's a good beach day, as I think it was Penelope Kenyon pointed out. Speaking of crocs, there, of course, again, I did my usual quick check of the latest conservation and wildlife news this morning. And there's been some interesting things discovered about pythons. That they have a specific type of cell within their digestive system or within their stomach that may help to take excess calcium from the skeletons and the bones of the things that they are eating whole, and then helping the body deal with that. I'm just wondering whether or not they might be able to find the same idea in crocodiles. Of course, crocodiles have exceptionally acidic stomachs, around about 1.5 pH or even less, 1 pH. That's like sulfuric acid or battery acid. But breaking down calcium and keratin and those other things is difficult, and it would make sense if they had some extra biological functions to deal with that. Oh, croc cave. Not quite as cool as the bat cave, but a croc cave nonetheless. Okay, nice to check in with some crocs. Let's head back up to Oldonyo in Kenya. Trixie Rose, you're referring to that what we were talking about with the chimps' behaviour. Could they be mimicking humans with buds in their ears? Well, that was one suggestion, that maybe they were copying humans or their keepers in terms of sort of earrings and adornments of the ears and accessorizing. They did actually speak to the people who had close contact with those chimps and asked whether they had consciously been doing anything like that, and they said they had not. So it is perhaps one idea that they're mimicking humans, but I wouldn't have thought that uh, chimp keepers, if that's the right word for them, the people working with them, are going to go in with big dangly earrings. But certainly if we think it is a mimicked behavior and building social bonds, it's not beyond the realms of possibility. But I can't imagine the keepers would be sitting in their enclosures, cleaning their ears with earbuds, say, nor with great big dangly earrings on them in case they would get lost or caught on something. Everybody always gets a shock where the giraffe's neck snaps back up, that nuchal ligament suddenly de-stretching. What's the word I want? Returning to its normal. I can't go over it, but they have this say elasticated ligament on the back of their neck that stretches down when they do bend down to drink like that, and when they finish drinking, they just release it and it pings back upwards. One of the great ways that they have, so they don't have to actually use muscles to hold that huge neck upright. It's all done through clever physiology, and yeah, often gives everybody a bit of a shock when they spring back. Canine girl, I agree. It is so lovely to see many species in the same area and watching how they respond to each other. They're all living their own lives, but they're all part of the same ecosystem, so very much interlinked with one another.
The Wild Earth Impact Foundation is a non-profit that uses the power of wildlife storytelling as a force for good. We create sustainable development projects that showcase conservation stories, empower people, and inspire environmental action. As a registered South African PBO, you can make a tax-deductible donation to the Wild Earth Impact Foundation. To find out more, visit our website.
My full name is Cedric Leslie Dold. The best driver at Wild Earth, it is me. I believe I'm the best driver. I think so, because I've... Best part of my job, I say, is just to try and look out for these animals, track them down. I love tracking animals. I love looking for, fresh tracks, and if you can find them, it's just at the moment of accomplishment. If I wasn't a presenter for Wild Earth, I would be the drummer for AC/DC.
moment is that there is an interstellar visitor in our solar system at the moment, an asteroid that we believe has come from elsewhere and is now in orbit around the sun, or at least is passing through our solar system. I can't give you the specifics, I only saw it a day or two ago and didn't read all the fine print, as it were. But I think that's sort of the latest. The other thing, we're still enjoying all the amazing images being sent back from the Vera Rubin Observatory and its redonkulous camera, the biggest and most complex digital camera ever created. I actually just wrote an article on it for the local newspaper here in Hoedspruit, which will be coming out next month. But the whole camera itself is 3 meters in length by 1.5 or 1.65 meters tall and weighs in at just under 3 tons and has 3.2 gigapixels. So compare that to a good quality mirrorless camera that has 45 megapixels. A big difference. They reckon in order to display that full image properly on TV screens, you'd need about 400 UHD 4K TVs to be able to display the whole image at full size, such as its resolution. Thank you, Lenny. Thank you for your good luck wishes. I don't hold out much hope. There are some pretty incredible submissions there, but if you like that sort of thing, go and have a look through all the submissions. There are some unbelievable photographs that have been created, been taken. But they have done a picture of the Lagoon Nebula in the surrounding area in Sagittarius. They've released pictures of the Virgo cluster of thousands of galaxies and all the billions of galaxies in the background. But it's an amazing camera. It can photograph the entire southern hemisphere sky every 3 or 4 days. And we'll be doing that for the next 10 years, giving us a great sort of time lapse of everything, allowing us to see very, very deep, but also track what we call near-Earth objects. So things like asteroids, we can see them moving over lots of pictures. The background stars don't move, and those objects do move. Very important for keeping an eye on anything that might impact with Earth. Which, of course, we hope will not be the case. And if everyone remembers from earlier this year or the end of last year, that object that might impact with us in 2032 or whatever it was, and that there was a small percent chance it was going to careen into the Earth, that is now down to a 0% chance. Thankfully, that one's not going to happen. But it's for objects like that that Vera Rubin will be able to assist with. Lenny, you're saying Old Donio always delivers. It does. It is certainly my favourite camera here. There's always things happening. Constant flow of zebras, giraffe, elephants in and out. Possibly in the background, was there some eland or something closer to the tree line? But yeah, a very, very productive camera, certainly. Oh, they kudu. They look like kudu in between the zebra rumps there. No melanistic marble, no sign of Mount Kilimanjaro today, I'm afraid. Too much cloud cover, which has often been the case of late. But it is one of the amazing things about this camera, to watch this rich diversity of wildlife and have an iconic object like Mount Kilimanjaro in the background. You're right, melanistic marble, this bull does have very tatty ears. Who knows what has happened to him, but I'm pretty sure it's just from the older the elephant, the tattier the ears, just catching on vegetation, so skin very, very thin, much easier to rip. And say there is a type of bacteria that can then infect a wound from that ear ripping and stop it from healing, or eat away slightly at the skin and the flesh around it to accentuate those tears and rips, apparently. They're very good for identifying individuals. Tusks and ears, and the way in which those tears and rips are very easy to record specifics for individuals. My waterhole. You're saying it's the only place you've ever seen a striped hyena during the night time? Well, I'm jealous, Lenny. I have never seen a striped hyena, but they don't occur down here in southern Africa. But definitely one of those mammals that I still need to tick off the list. I know we had a brown hyena at Camelthorne a couple of weeks ago that was seen. I believe the first one that was seen, he had a very injured front left paw, if I remember correctly, and was really struggling to get up that steep slope. I don't know if it has been seen since or if other ones have been seen. But I would be very excited if striped hyena wandered into the fray today. At what point this elephant is going to lose his temper about being potentially surrounded by zebras. Mr. Bunda, you're saying it doesn't look like the elephant wants to share. It's getting a little bit territorial. I'd say this one is being quite tolerant. We have seen elephants in Albania that don't like to share their water with anything else. As long as they don't try and drink right next to him, he seems to be fairly accepting of all these other animals at the moment. But there we go, he didn't like that. But everybody has a breaking point. That was obviously too many zebra. But one quick flick of the trunk and a shake of the head clears the area pretty rapidly. Jenna, you're asking if we wiped ticks out, would birds have enough insects to eat? Yes, Jenna, I think they would. The oxpeckers would probably struggle because that is their modus operandi. They have evolved to eat ticks off animals. That is their ecological niche that they exploit. I have no doubt that they could learn to eat other insects, but whether or not they could adapt quickly enough for the sake of the species, I think would remain to be seen. But there are plenty of insects in the world, of that there is no doubt. So, and we've seen it happen during all the DDT spraying and cattle dips and everything of when farming became very prevalent in these areas. the yellow-billed oxpecker all but disappeared from the far south or South Africa in general. These elephants decided he's had enough. And now we're seeing them begin to return again. There were still plenty of them further north, and they are now beginning to be very regularly seen. So things do change. There are ebbs and flows, but that was a very good example of how removing a very specific insect can have a knock-on effect of a particular species. But birds themselves are a huge controlling mechanism of insects in general. Doug may love you said the zebra's got a spook. I think the spook came in the form of a 6-ton rampaging elephant. But yes, but they come back very, very quickly. They're just jumpy. So highly attuned to their surroundings, these prey animals. It just takes one or two to get a fright, and that message passes almost instantaneously through the rest of the group, and they move together as one. Okay, now and go. You're saying we talk a lot about matriarchal systems in ellies, and what about other herds and guiding others and passing down knowledge? I assume you mean in other species. Well, I think we talk about it more in elephants and see it more in elephants just because of their larger brain capacity and that knowledge that can be retained for decades and passed on to other individuals, and how that is passed through different generations. I mean, I've always considered lions to be somewhat matriarchal because, yes, we know that the males are the ones who look after the females in terms of protecting them from interloper males, but the core pride of females themselves will always look to one female above others. That just makes a lot of the decisions as opposed to whom they're going to mate with, where they're going to go, where the best hunting grounds would be. So that would be one example I would think of. I think we see it less in territorial animals because they don't have to move so far. Elephants being far more nomadic and having a home range as opposed to a territory, it becomes vastly more important of that knowledge of where good grazing or permanent water sources can be found in times of environmental stresses. Wildebeest and zebra, I don't know. I'm assuming there is knowledge that is passed down within family members and generations, but I would think probably not to the same extent as elephants due to their more limited brain capacity, dare I say that without causing offence to these beautiful zebras. I'm sure we would see similar things passed down within things like the primates, but again, they're generally pretty sedentary, so as long as they know their specific territorial area, there isn't quite the need for that knowledge to be passed on. But interesting thought, Kenangal. If I come up with any others, I will let you know.
My name is Amy, and today we're going to be doing things a little bit differently.
Step into the heart of Africa from the comfort of your home.
Female leopard tracks over here.
Join our expert guides for a live 3-hour safari where every moment is real, unscripted, and unforgettable. Ask questions.
Animals rely on their senses.
Share your thoughts and be part of the experience as we explore together. Safari Live.
Okay, well, a nice brief cameo of a croc there. Let's head back up to Kenya and our doggo. Unusual to see an elephantless vista, for now at least. You'd expect all the other animals to quickly come racing. It's a mixture between rushing and racing in to take advantage. Mandela, you're asking, is it true that zebra lines can be used to identify each and every zebra? Yes, Mandela, it is. Believe it or not, every zebra is unique. Well, not that I've compared every single one. But just like we have fingerprints unique to ourselves, every stripe pattern of a zebra is unique as well. It's one of the ways they're able to recognize each other. Youngsters will key off mum's stripe pattern as well as smell and sound and all the other things. But yes, it is one of the most incredibly diverse patternings that we find in nature, but it's not unusual. Every giraffe will have a slightly different patterning on the skin as well. You could line them all up and you might find some that are very, very similar, but every one will have slight differences. You can do that yourself, Mundler. Have a good look at these two coming across, and you can see there are variations where the stripes join, where the branches are. You get some unusual markings as well, but particularly around the shoulder there, or the bit where the leg joins the trunk. Those sort of lovely triangular markings. That's one of the areas we think that the babies key off, or the foals key off, because that will be a eye height for them. But yeah, just as the camera pans around, have a look at each individual one and you'll see that they're all similar, but they're all very much different in their own right. I suppose we get identical twins. I don't know if it'd be interesting to know on the very, very, very rare occasion that you get twin animals born, for ones that normally only produce one animal, how similar their stripe pattern would be. Now, there has been some studies done very recently with giraffe that suggests that their offspring do have quite similar patterns, or there are similarities between the patterns of parent and offspring, which would make sense because it's genetic information being passed down. At least half of the makeup of that offspring will come obviously from one of the parents. So it would make sense that they would manifest, or that would manifest with certain similarities. But that's the beauty of life, having chromosomes or two sets of chromosomes from two different parents negates the chances of the exact same clone being produced. This zebra walking away looks a little bit pregnant. Contrast in the back there between a male and a female giraffe. You can see how much bigger and heavier set the male is than the female. Of course, harder to tell in zebras. The easiest way to look under the tail for that vertical stripe that sort of goes in between the cheeks. Very, very thin black stripe in males, much broader black stripe in the females, and usually males are a little bit more contrasty, a bit more black and whitey, if that's a phrase. A much heavier set head, obviously the much larger ossicones, taller and just more strongly built. end. Yes, and taller. You can see him towering above the females. He looks like a good-sized older male, though. I think he's feeling slightly amorous. I think he investigated this one female, was not interested. Another one's coming in, so he's going to go and try his luck there, perhaps. Yep. Anything of interest? Nope, didn't seem too impressed with that. Nice opportunity to compare the patterning of these two giraffe front on. You can see very, very different. One on the left slightly darker, I would say, but you can see the patterning completely different. Similar, but different. But Beth, you're saying you used to know someone who was doing a master's on zebras and could identify every individual member of the herd being studied. Yeah, absolutely. That does not surprise me. Takes a little bit of work and dedication, certainly. I think also if you're studying those animals and watching them day in, day out, you start to recognize individuals. I used to find that even with lions that obviously don't exhibit the same patterning, but I was fairly confident of knowing which individual I was seeing, even from distance or from a silhouette, just the way in which they carried themselves, their size, the muscle mass, the way in which they walked, the sort of shape of their body. If you spend enough time with the same animals, you do pick up those subtle little variations. Melanistic Marble, you're saying that you've noticed these zebras don't have the shadow stripe. Yeah, that's something we've mentioned a few times before here with the zebras we see at Old Onyo. It's why the East African zebra used to be a separate species. We're talking about how names have changed recently. So these used to be plains zebras, and down here we used to have what they call the Birchall's zebra, and now the Birchall's zebra is no longer. These ones are also considered plains zebras now, and that shadow stripe just being a regional variation. I always say, as far as I'm concerned, it is just because we have more wooded material down here, it makes sense to have a bit more brown within your coloration to help blend in a little bit. That may or may not be the case. That's my own theory, but I'm sure shared by many other people as well. Chris Babunda, is there a friendship between zebras and giraffe? Well, never say never, Chris, but I'm not specifically in the way you and I perhaps would use the word friendship. I'm sure they probably recognize individuals, but remember that's all done as we can see there. It's most species or individual recognition is done through smell, and that requires very specific software that you're only going to find in that one species to decode that specific information. But you do find animals of different species hanging out together and forming bonds with each other. So never say never. But I don't think they sort of sit around the campfire and have a catch up every evening if they do graze in the same or feed in the same area. Wow, there's a deluge of questions coming in. Sorry, everybody, I'm trying to keep up with them all. Lucy, you're saying what happens when the water holes dry up? What do the animals do? Well, most of the water holes where we have these cameras are pumped. There are pipes with a sort of a trickle flow into them to stop that from happening. In other areas, there are seasonal pans that do dry up. And if that's the case, the animals have to go to a new area to find water. It is the way of the world. It's the way it always used to be before we started interfering and changing things and reducing the amount of space that animals have and stealing their water for irrigation and everything else. So we see that a lot more regularly now, but we've learnt over the years that by constantly keeping multiple water sources full of water, it actually has a detrimental effect on the environment because the animals don't move away, they don't migrate anywhere. That leads to overgrazing, it leads to soil erosion. So it's a fine balance. It's conservation management, really. But in an enclosed area where we have given the animals no other way to find water, then yes, it will be our responsibility to provide them with water.
Katika mwanga wa mwezi kivuli hutembea, mrembo mweusi anayepotea, macho yake ni taa, gizani huwaka, fuvu la msitu, malkia anayejificha.
I get to wake up every morning and go out there and look for cats. I get to create my everyday safari for myself. I grew up in the sort of central eastern suburbs of Johannesburg, fully qualified trails guide and a fully qualified nature conservationist. I love the wild places. I love being in the wilderness. It's probably one of the best jobs I've ever had and probably ever could have.
Out here, every wild moment counts, and as a Wild Earth explorer, you won't miss a thing.
Incredible.
Watch the Wild Earth channel ad-free 24/7 and rewind if you want to catch something again. Enjoy behind-the-scenes videos, fireside chats, and early access to travel offers. The best way to stay connected and be part of the Wild Earth family.
Chromosomes passed on from the parents. Same reason that some elephants have big tusks, some have small tusks. We've hunted out a lot of the big tuskers, so the genetics for big tusks are not being passed on. So it will be a culmination of the two parents and the genes relating to the size of their ossicones. Beautiful scenes of tandem giraffes drinking. D, you're saying giraffe differences are way more than you can tackle. Yeah, it's a lot of patches to compare, isn't it? What happened to those giraffe? Giraffe do have beautiful faces, close-up wildlife lady, I agree. They're very soft and I'm trying to think of a good descriptive word for them, but soft, I think, is as good as I can come up with. Very pretty, the long eyelashes. It's just an appealing shape. But yeah, those big doughy eyes and long eyelashes, I think, also help to accentuate the effect. Caleb, you're asking what a giraffe's teeth are like. Um, Different from ours, but there are some similarities. They have incisors on their lower jaw, but not on their upper jaw, which is the case for quite a lot of antelopes, just being replaced by sort of a bony pad because they don't need to physically sort of bite and shred things with those incisors. They obviously don't have canines because they don't need to grab hold of prey. That is more of a an adaptation for carnivorous animals. And then they have molars at the back for grinding the food that they eat, for grinding up those leaves. And again, as is the case with a lot of herbivorous animals, they have what's called a diastema, which is a gap between the incisors and the molars, which I think just increases the amount of food that they can put into their mouth and to process. Important to have very strong molars with their habit, particularly for the ruminants, of regurgitating and re-chewing that food. I'd have to check the exact dental formula to tell you how many teeth that they've got. Um, I would think probably similar to other animals. Let me see if I can just find out quickly for you. They do. They have 32 teeth, just like us, but they lack the canines and they lack upper incisors. Darkmane lover, you're enjoying watching the giraffes drinking. It is very therapeutic, isn't it? It's very relaxing, perfect entertainment for a Sunday afternoon. And Melanistic Marble, you're on the lookout for a giraffe painting for your wall. Well, good luck. There are many, I'm sure, that you can choose from abstract to life creations, real life creations. So, yeah, beauty or art is in the eye of the beholder, certainly. I'm sure you'll find one that works for you. And I'm sure it'll be a lovely addition to your interior decorations. Lucy Chachodi, you'd like to know how giraffes sleep? Well, they will lie down to rest, but still with their necks up. Often when they're ruminating, even when an animal is ruminating, it is sleep is the wrong word, but it's in a state of relaxation. Studies have shown that their brain waves do actually change. So when they are ruminating, they're still alert, but their body is in sort of partial shutdown mode, just a way to conserve energy. If they do actually take proper sleep, which they do from time to time, I always equate it to that of a duck. They will actually contort their neck, bend it completely around, and then rest their chin on their rump. But they generally won't sleep for longer than sort of 10, 20 minutes at a time of deep sleep, and that may only be once every few days. But that ability to sort of almost enter a trance-like state when they're ruminating seems to be enough most of the time to recoup enough energy.
Now this leopard that we're looking at is known by the name of Hlalamba.
Even a hyena coming into the action as well now. Oh my word! She's stalking the hyena now. Leopard, hyena, lion, all together in one shot. Oh! Whoa. This is action-packed.
Best sighting I've presented. I found myself with wild dogs. We chased the dogs around, chased them around. They ate an impala. We got the end of that. Then another impala went into Gowrie Dam down the road there, and the wild dogs went around. Eventually the impala came close to the bank. One wild dog went and grabbed it and then just pulled it out and just did what wild dogs do. It was an emotional experience, but it was very, very special.
Leaves as ears. Excellent memory. It was a fun afternoon Taylor and I had there. With Igor's help, who was on camera as well. We mustn't forget Igor. Ollie, no, these are not reticulated giraffes. In Kenya, we have got Maasai giraffes. A reticulated giraffe have a beautiful patterning. The reticulated giraffe, a lot more sort of blocky, less gaps in between them. I will need to double check exactly what their distribution is, but they are endangered, as are most of them these days, most giraffe species. That being said, there are most commonly found in Kenya, like Meru National Park, Samburu National Reserve, the northern side of Mount Kenya, Mnazini, and Tsavo East National Park, which isn't that far away from here. So maybe one day we'll be graced with a reticulated giraffe, but very, very distinct patterning. We would be able to tell the difference. These Maasai giraffe, much smaller patches, more jagged edges, whereas they're reticulated, more blocky and sort of square-like. Jenny, you're saying it's like evolution has been slow for giraffe, but they still have to drink like this. Well, yes and no. It's a trade-off, I suppose, of developing the long neck, which possibly to reach higher food, maybe as a result of sexual selection. But yes, I agree. It is not the best design in terms of having to get water, but they compensate by that with having evolved an incredibly efficient stomach, meaning they don't require as much water as many other animals. They can go days without water. Very, very efficient digestive system to extract as much water as possible from what they're eating. So swings and roundabouts, Jenna, swings and roundabouts. Riley, you're asking why so many giraffe species are endangered? Well, unfortunately, it's mostly because of humans. Again, habitat loss, fragmentation of that habitat, the inability to move between corridors, traditional corridors, erection of fences, private reserves that stop the spread, reduce genetic diversity. There has, of course, been some poaching and illegal hunting. Um, but yeah, mostly it's human interference again, unfortunately, and us changing things more quickly than the animals can adapt. But on that rather macabre note, let's go to another one of our cameras. Sorry, I didn't quite catch which one. Let's have a look. Ah, back down to South Africa to Nkoro. That little touch of the trunk from the youngster into mother's mouth, which we often see in elephants, that tactile communication. There was an interesting article as well I saw this morning of two orcas, the killer whales, that were actually recorded, for want of a better description, French kissing for a couple of minutes, sort of nibbling on each other's tongues and things, which hasn't really been seen before. Nobody quite knows why, whether it was some form of social bonding. They are very intelligent social animals, whether it was a means of keeping the tongue clean from bacteria, sort of some form of aloe grooming. Nobody's quite sure, but yeah, you can go and watch some orcas kissing if you Google that. Well, only a few minutes left, unfortunately. Canine Girl, I'm glad you found today's show to be so entertaining. Thanking myself and everybody in FC making it possible, and say all those very, very clever tech people who can help us bounce between these cameras and bring you these amazing feeds. Good luck with whatever the rest of your day holds, and thank you very much for joining us. Ooh. Not sure what that was all about. Godmain lover, I'm glad you've also enjoyed today's show. It has been a good one, actually. We've had some nice variety of species, some interesting things to watch. Not sure what's put a bee in this elephant's bonnet, particularly. The hammercock perched on the hippo. How strange, they just did a big loop around that little mound and came back to the other side. Thank you, Wildlife Lady. Again, glad you enjoyed today's show. We will pass on your thanks to everybody involved, as always. And say, most importantly, thank you, everybody who has been watching, and thank you for the sheer number of questions. I'm going to have to go and have a hearty drink of water after this. You guys have very much kept me on my toes and got the grey matter working overtime today, but it is always lovely to hear from you. So please do keep it up. Any perch is a good perch. Look as if these two have had a bit of an argument. But we are down to within a minute, unfortunately, of the end of the show. Don't forget to stick around for the sunset safari from the teens out and about. See some pretty amazing stuff, I have no doubt. Learn some cool facts, catch up with your favourite characters. But we will leave you with this rather striking image of this hamerkop, beautiful silhouette. And so whatever your plans are for the rest of this Sunday, I hope they involve a Sunday roast, potentially. But I hope you have a lovely day. Thanks for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. And we'll catch up with you all again very, very soon.
Welcome to Safari Spotlight. Come with us and discover some of South Africa's wildest places, the Lowveld, the Eastern Cape and the Waterberg. We will be tracking some amazing wildlife. Our locations are unique and diverse with captivating charm and character, all full